Have you ever noticed how Gen X parents can be both incredibly laid back and surprisingly intense at the same time? Like one minute they're saying, just figure it out, you'll be fine. And the next, they're giving you a full lecture about responsibility, money, and how the world doesn't owe you anything. It's almost like they're parenting with one eyebrow raised and one eye watching the exit. If you grew up with Gen X parents, or if you are one, you've probably felt this strange mix of freedom and pressure. Freedom to roam, to make mistakes, to solve your own problems, but also pressure to be independent, resilient, and not complain too much. So what's going on psychologically? Why do Gen X parents seem to operate with this unique blend of chill and toughness? To understand them, we have to rewind a little. Gen X, the generation born roughly between 1965 and 1980, grew up in a very specific cultural moment. They were kids during the rise of divorce rates, latchkey afternoons, and rapid technological change. Many of them came home from school to empty houses, made their own snacks, and entertained themselves without constant supervision. They didn't have smartphones. They didn't have helicopter parents hovering over every assignment. They had space, sometimes too much space. And here's where it gets interesting. Psychologically, childhood experiences don't just disappear. They become internal blueprints. According to attachment theory, early caregiving patterns shape how we relate to others and how we see responsibility and closeness. Many Gen Xers grew up with more emotional and physical independence than previous generations. Some learned self-reliance out of necessity. Others learned to downplay their needs because nobody was around to constantly check in. So when they became parents, they carried that blueprint with them. But here's the twist. They don't necessarily want their kids to feel neglected. They just believe deeply that independence builds strength. To them, letting you struggle a little isn't cruelty. It's preparation. When they say, you'll figure it out, it's not dismissal. It's faith, sometimes awkwardly expressed faith. There's also a cultural layer. Gen X came of age during economic uncertainty, recessions, and corporate downsizing. They watched promises of job security dissolve. They saw institutions fail. This shaped what psychologists call a realistic or even slightly cynical worldview. Not hopeless, just wary. So when they push their kids to be practical, to get a real job, to save money, it's often rooted in a survival mindset. They're not trying to crush your dreams, they're trying to protect you from disappointment. And yet they are also the generation that embraced grunge music, alternative culture, and a strong streak of individualism. Think about the rise of artists like Kurt Cobain or the influence of bands like Nirvana. There was this undercurrent of questioning authority, rejecting polish, valuing authenticity. Gen X learned to be skeptical of systems and loyal to personal truth. That attitude shows up in their parenting too. They often don't care as much about appearances as previous generations did. They might not obsess over perfect family photos or rigid social expectations, but they care deeply about whether you're real, honest, capable. They want you to think for yourself. Now let's talk about their low drama vibe. If you've ever tried to get a dramatic emotional reaction out of a Gen X parent, you might have noticed it doesn't always work. You tell them something shocking and they respond with, okay, and it can feel invalidating. But psychologically, this response often comes from emotional regulation learned early in life. When you grow up having to manage your own feelings, you develop a certain stoicism. You learn to downshift big emotions because nobody else is going to do it for you. That doesn't mean they don't feel deeply. In fact, many Gen X parents feel intensely. They just express it differently. Love might show up as fixing your car, teaching you how to do taxes, or reminding you not to trust every stranger on the internet. It's practical love, action-oriented love. And here is something fascinating. Research on generational parenting styles shows that each generation often reacts to the one before it. Many Gen Xers were raised by baby boomers, a generation sometimes characterized by strong ideals, big ambitions, and structured expectations. Gen X responded by becoming more flexible, more ironic, more whatever. So when they parent, they often aim for balance, not too strict, not too soft. I'm not going to control every detail of your life, but you need to handle your responsibilities. It's a tightrope. They don't want to smother you, but they also don't want you to be unprepared. And then there's technology. Gen X parents are the bridge generation. They remember life before the internet, but they also adapted to it. They saw the world change in real time. This creates a strange psychological tension. On one hand, they understand that technology is powerful and necessary. On the other, they instinctively distrust it. They know what it's like to grow up without constant comparison, without social media pressure. So when they limit their screen time or roll their eyes at online drama, it's not just generational grumpiness, it's perspective. They remember when identity wasn't curated 24/7. At the same time, they're often less obsessed with constant monitoring than some modern parents. They might not track your every move with apps, not because they don't care, but because their default setting is, you'll be okay. Now let's look at the emotional core. Deep down, many Gen X parents fear raising fragile kids, not because they judge sensitivity, but because they know how unpredictable the world can be. They believe resilience is armor. Psychologists define resilience as the ability to adapt and bounce back from stress. And Gen X, having navigated rapid cultural and economic shifts, sees resilience as non-negotiable. So when they encourage you to handle conflict on your own, to apply for jobs yourself, to solve friendship drama without immediate intervention, they're trying to strengthen that muscle. It might feel like distance, but often it's strategy. Of course, no generation is perfect. Sometimes the emphasis on independence can tip into emotional distance. Sometimes figure it out can feel lonely. Some Gen X parents struggle to verbalize affection because it wasn't always modeled for them. And here is the compassionate truth. You can only pass down what you were given or what you consciously work to change. But here's where it gets hopeful. Many Gen X parents are deeply reflective. They grew up in an era that popularized therapy and self-help in mainstream culture. They're not strangers to introspection. They might joke about midlife crises, but they also think about their childhood, their patterns, their mistakes. They may not always say it out loud, but they want to do better than what they experienced. And there's something powerful about being raised by someone who believes in your capability. Even if they don't hover, and even if they don't dramatize every emotion, there's a quiet confidence in the message, you can handle this. Over time, that belief can become your own inner voice. Imagine a kid trying to ride a bike. One parent runs alongside, holding the seat for a long time. Another lets go sooner than expected. The second approach can feel scary, wobbly, but sometimes that early release teaches balance faster. Gen X parents tend to be the ones who let go, while standing close enough to step in if you truly crash. Psychologically, that's a mix of autonomy support and firm boundaries. And research consistently shows that when kids feel both capable and supported, not controlled, not abandoned, they develop a strong self-efficacy. That inner belief of, I can do hard things. If you're a Gen X parent watching this, maybe you've worried that you're too hands-off, or not emotionally expressive enough, or too blunt, but your strength is realism. You don't sugarcoat life. You prepare your kids for it. And if you're the child of Gen X parents, maybe you have sometimes wished for more reassurance, more softness. But look at what you've likely gained: adaptability, problem-solving skills, a sense that you're not helpless in the face of challenges. The psychology of Gen X parenting isn't about perfection. It's about balance forged in uncertainty. It's about growing up in a world that changed quickly and deciding to raise kids who can change with it. So the next time your Gen X parent shrugs and says, "You've got this," pause for a second. Under that casual tone is a lifetime of learning how to survive, adapt, and stay authentic. It's not indifference, it's belief. And maybe the real gift isn't constant reassurance. Maybe it's the quiet confidence that you're capable of navigating the world on your own terms.